a lot of people who struggle with staying consistent when it comes to exercise, it's not because they're lazy or they lack time. It's because they don't have a prescription. We often hear the term that exercise is medicine, but unfortunately, it's not prescribed in the way that medication is. So in this video, I want to unpack that and help you understand what role exercise plays in your life and how you can get more consistent when it comes to exercise. Hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Hasan Qureshi. I'm an exercise physiologist. And what that means is I help people learn and adopt exercise as a tool to live a better quality of life. We're not just here to help people lose some weight or build some muscle. We're here to help them understand their medical conditions and their lifestyles and what role exercise can play in order to help them live a better life. So in this video, I want to unpack the statement, exercise is medicine. And we often hear it, but unfortunately, we don't often see it in practice. What do I mean by that? Well, pretend you walk into a doctor's clinic and you've been told that, hey, your blood works have come in and you have elevated blood sugar levels. In other words, we think you have type 2 diabetes, right? Now, the doctor could give you either a prescription of medication or they can start with lifestyle factors. So they can say, improve your diet and physical activity. When it comes to medication, they won't just tell you take some drugs, right? That would be a pretty poor doctor who says that. They would say, listen, I want you to start taking metformin, 500 milligrams. I want you to take it twice a day. And I want you to take it for at least 6 to 12 weeks and then come back and tell me how you're going. That is what we call a prescription. Not just a drug, but a prescription of a medication. Compare that to what often we hear when it comes to exercise. The doctor might say, I think you need to start doing some exercise. I think you need to start moving more. Why don't you start walking, right? And a lot of people walk away from that feeling confused, feeling overwhelmed, and just not really sure how to go about it. And it's no wonder that when people ask, are you exercising? People say no, because they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing when we say exercise. And so that's what I want to unpack in this video here, is what does a prescription of exercise actually look like? So the first thing that I would say is if you're thinking about what an exercise prescription looks like, consider three things. Number one is when I prescribe people exercise in my job, I look at three things. I look at number one, what is the purpose? What is the primary objective for which I am helping this person adopt exercise? Number two is based on that purpose, what is the context? And by context, I mean, what are some comorbidities? So sure, this person might have type 2 diabetes, but they also have a total knee replacement 12 weeks ago. I've got to consider that. They also are, overweight. I've got to consider that. They also have never done exercise in their life, right? I've got to consider that. So what is the context of this person? What is their, subjective experience of life up until now? And number three, it's what are the variables? So based on the goal of exercise and the context that this person brings, how am I going to prescribe this exercise? What are the variables? And so it's those variables that essentially form the prescription of exercise. So let me give you an example. If I was to say to you, you should do some resistance training. In other words, you should lift some weights. That is a very general form of, it's more of a suggestion, right? How do I make that a prescription? Is I would say, okay, because you're just starting, we need to only pick 4 exercises that you can do in which you are pushing or pulling some resistance, right? In other words, you could do what we call bicep curls. You pick up a weight, bring it up to your shoulder, bring it back down. That's exercise number 1. We need to pick exercise number 2. So maybe you stand up from the chair and you sit down again. That's what we call sit to stand. Number 3, we need to pull some resistance. Maybe do a seated row and you pull that towards you with some weight on the cable machine. Number 4, maybe we take a dumbbell, we push it from the shoulder, we go up, and that's a type of exercise. And so those are 4 exercises, but now we need to come up with a prescription around these 4. So I will say, do each of them 10 times. That's 10 repetitions, and then do it twice. So do the whole circuit twice. And so that's 2 sets of 10 repetitions. You would do that once a day. You do that the next 6 weeks. And that is much closer to a prescription than me just saying, go and do some resistance training, right? And the same thing applies to other forms of exercise. When it comes to cardio, we don't just say, go walking. We might say something like, okay, you're currently doing maybe 30 minutes of walking a week. By the sounds of it, we want to get to a goal of 150 minutes. And so the way we're going to do that is not by next week you aiming for this, is we set some milestones along the way. And over the next 4 weeks, we want to get to this point. And so next week, your job is to get to 60 minutes of exercise, of walking, I should say, per week. And so you say, look, I want to only walk 6 days a week. Then it's only 10 minutes a day, right? And so that becomes the prescription. You need to do 10 minutes of walking every single day for 6 days a week to get you to a 60-minute target. And then next week, we'll review that, right? So this is what I mean by a prescription. This is where an exercise physiologist comes into the picture and helps to understand what is the prescription of exercise that you need, rather than just saying you need to exercise. So I'll ask you a simple question. Do you have an exercise prescription? In other words, do you have an exercise program that answers these 3 questions of why am I exercising? What is the context in which I'm exercising? What are some of the variables that I've got to consider about my lifestyle? And then what are the variables of the exercise? Am I clear on that? Am I clear on how many exercises I should do, on which days, how many repetitions of what? And if you don't have that clearly outlined, then you can't fault yourself for not sticking to the plan, because to be fair, you don't really have a plan. And so there's no shame in that. The first step is recognizing that. And the next step is to go about formulating that plan. And so now you have 2 choices. You can either formulate the plan yourself, or you can find an expert to help guide you along the way. And typically the expert you're looking for is an exercise physiologist. So really look for an exercise physiologist. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the description to a tool that you can use to find a local exercise physiologist near you. If I can be of any service, please feel free to reach out. You can comment any questions that you have down below, or find me on Instagram and go ahead and DM me. I'll look to respond to them as soon as possible. So guys, that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you guys. All the best.